By the time the second pretend officer burst into tears in the hydrangeas, the real police were already doubled over laughing. Two full-grown men in discount tactical vests were sprawled face down across my front yard. Hands laced behind their heads, knees sinking into the lawn, I edged with military precision. My 7-year-old daughter, Maddie, watched from the front window, hugging a stuffed dolphin in one hand and a juice box in the other. Across the street, Denise Harrow, president of the illustrious Cypress Hollow Reserve HOA, shrieked from her driveway, her hair molded into a helmet of sprayed-on blonde rage. She hollered that the men were protecting the neighborhood, that I was a trained killer, that people had no idea what I was capable of. One of the officers shot me a look-me, standing there in a faded t-shirt and gym shorts, arms loose at my sides, expression flat as concrete. He asked if they truly tried to take my daughter. My jaw ticked once. Yeah, I said. So I suggested they try crawling instead. I pointed to the muddy streak carved across my lawn, where the men had indeed crawled, badges missing, pride pulverized, till I told them to stop and wait for the real cops. Behind me, a teenager narrated into his phone camera that a Navy SEAL, Dad had just turned the HOA's bargain bin SWAT team into lawn ornaments. But before the crawling, before the shrieking, before Denise decided I was her personal war crime, I had moved to Cypress Hollow for one simple reason. I just wanted quiet. After 12 years as a Navy SEAL, 3 deployments, and more chaos than anyone should cram into a lifetime, I retired, bought the last house on a cul-de-sac, and envisioned a life built around school drop-offs for Maddie, early morning runs, obsessively mowing perfect stripes into my grass, and grilling on weekends without someone trying to kill me. Cypress Hollow Reserve advertised itself as a gated sanctuary of calm. The brochure used words like oasis, serenity, community, and artisan-crafted mailboxes. Buried in the closing paperwork was something less serene. It's the Cypress Hollow Reserve Homeowners Association. At first, I barely cared. I paid the dues. I skimmed the welcome packet. I smiled at neighbors who used terms like curb appeal as if speaking scripture. Then Denise Harrow materialized. Denise was HOA president, neighborhood Facebook dictator, and self-appointed curator of every detail of everyone else's existence. She kept a clipboard welded to her palm, possessed a master's degree in passive-aggressive correspondence, believed the HOA bylaws were only a rung below the Constitution. Where I saw a small flagpole, a tire swing for Maddie, and a pull-up bar tucked along the side yard, Denise saw unauthorized vertical display items, unsafe hanging mechanisms, and a paramilitary training apparatus visible from the road, the first time she introduced herself. She didn't bother with hello. She simply pointed at the pull-up bar and announced that it was not on my approved landscaping plan. I stared at the bar, then at her. I told her I didn't know I needed permission to do push-ups. Her smile was tight, brittle, the kind you'd find on a plastic doll. She replied, "You'd be surprised what requires permission here." The notices started small and spiraled into deranged. First came front yard toys visible from the street after 6 p.m., which referred to Maddie's pink scooter. Next was sidewalk chalk drawings, exceeding private property boundaries, meaning a hopscotch grid that crossed a concrete seam. Then the flag size exceeds recommended dimensions, referring to a modest American flag that made Denise's eye noticeably twitch. I posted one of the letters on the fridge for Maddie. She asked what it meant. I told her it was a note from people with too much time and asked if she wanted to draw a dragon with chalk tomorrow. She grinned and nodded. Denise escalated. She began walking her dog past my house 4 times a day. Phone out, recording me doing push-ups in the driveway, filming me hauling bags of mulch which she later labeled intimidating physical displays, and photographing Maddie's tree swing, which she called an unsecured aerial device. At an HOA meeting, I accidentally wandered into once. I heard her declare that they had a responsibility to monitor higher-risk properties, that my background was concerning. I asked what she meant by background. Denise smiled like a cat about to swallow a bird and said my military career, exposure to violence, combat stress, and that they wanted to ensure all children were safe. I asked if she meant my daughter. She repeated all children like that magically sanitized the insult. The neighborhood rumor mill spun out of control. I heard he keeps weapons stashed everywhere. He trains his kid like a junior soldier. My friend's cousin's husband was a SEAL and he snapped once, I tried to ignore it. I kept to myself. I coached Maddie's chaotic backyard soccer matches. I waved at neighbors anyway. Then, the anonymous calls began. Twice, Child Protective Services showed up. The first time, a social worker toured my home and saw Maddie's art taped to the fridge. Her room stuffed with plush animals, shelves lined with picture books and graphic novels, a backyard filled with a swing, sandbox, and exactly one pull-up bar. She left her card, apologized, and explained they'd received a report that my home was militarized. I asked if they meant because of the swing. She said the caller specifically mentioned weapons training on the lawn and attached a photo. The photo showed me teaching Maddie how to do cartwheels. CPS closed the case twice. They also gently informed Denise through a politely worded government letter to stop filing obviously malicious reports. Denise did not handle that with grace. At the next HOA meeting, she told her loyal inner circle that if the system wouldn't protect this community, they'd have to build their own. Thus emerged the Cypress Hollow Child Safety Task Force, otherwise known as. Denise showed up with her 2 signature henchmen in matching polos. The henchmen were Troy, her sister's boyfriend whose resume consisted mostly of owns a reflective vest and once guarded an orange Julius and Glenn. The HOA board member whose LinkedIn profile bragged about his role as neighborhood watch liaison as though he'd earned a military medal. They proudly purchased a used white Crown Victoria because it looked official, according to Troy. They slapped on magnetic decals that said Community Safety Patrol, clipped on plastic badges ordered from a bargain website, and strapped themselves into flimsy plate carriers that made them resemble failed cosplay characters who'd wandered into a Costco. Denise opened Microsoft Word and produced documents stuffed with bolded phrases like emergency, order, and child endangerment. She copy-pasted from legal blogs and CPS regulations until it appeared intimidating to anyone lacking basic legal literacy. At the top, she typed Cypress Hollow Child Welfare Enforcement Unit. At the bottom, she signed a dramatic, looping signature Officer D. Harrow, Community Child Protection Liaison, or Grand Strategy. If it could be called one was simple, pick a day when Maddie was home. Watch for me to drive off, march up with their clipboards and fake badges, tell whoever answered the door that they were there to remove the child for a safety assessment, and deal with any fallout later by blaming paperwork. In Denise's mind, she was heroically rescuing a child from a dangerous environment. In reality, she was designing a felony with the confidence of someone who thought word art was legally binding. Saturday afternoon, I mentioned to Maddie that I was heading to the hardware store for 20 minutes. She settled onto the living room carpet with markers and cartoons. What Denise hadn't accounted for was that my house had more cameras than a small casino, and every feed lived right on my phone. As I drove out of the subdivision, I noticed the white Crown Vic parked 2 streets over magnetic decals, cheap light bar, and 2 men in vests trying very hard to look important. My phone buzzed. Motion alert. Front porch. I tapped the feed and heard Troy's voice. Cypress Hollow Child Safety Task Force. Sweetie, just need you to come with us for a little bit. Your dad knows. I pulled into someone's driveway, shut the truck off, and sat still enough to feel my heartbeat slow. Every part of my training from deserts, oceans, and close-quarter nightmares settled over me like a calm, cold tide. I turned the truck around. By the time Troy and Glenn jiggled the front door handle, I was already sprinting silently up the side yard, through the door. I heard Maddie's tiny voice. My dad said not to go anywhere. Troy thundered that this was an emergency, that they were basically police, but for kids, and that they could take her if necessary. A pinpoint of cold focus narrowed in my chest. The door cracked open just a sliver, showing one of Maddie's wide eyes. That was when I stepped onto the porch. "Hey, gentlemen," I said. "You lost?" Troy whipped around, hand grabbing for the toy badge dangling off his vest. Glenn jerked so hard, he jingled. Troy barked that I needed to step back, that this was official child safety business, that they had an emergency order. My eyes swept over his badge comic sans text crooked printing, no seal. Then the Crown Vic, with its Amazon light bar. I sighed. Nice costume. Halloween came early. Troy insisted they had legal authority. That was when Denise burst from behind a pillar where she'd been hiding like a malfunctioning jack-in-a-box. She announced they had documented concerns, that the neighborhood had voted, that I was unstable, that Maddie needed protection. Behind me, I felt Maddie's fingers tighten around the doorknob. Without turning, I softened my voice and told her, "Sweet pea, go lock the back door and wait in my room. Do you remember what we practiced?" She nodded, Evan, though I didn't look, and scampered away on socked feet. Glenn puffed up like a nervous rooster. He crowed that I'd basically confessed to drilling my kid. Clipboard scratching. I took one slow step forward. The shift in my posture was subtle, but complete, from tired dad in gym shorts to a man who had seen terrible things and walked away. "I drilled my kid," I said quietly. "So when people like you show up pretending to be cops, she knows how to get to safety." Troy attempted a rally. He waved the paper and stammered that they had an order for temporary protective custody. I plucked the paper from his hand, scanned it, and snorted. "This isn't an order. This is a Word document with too much bold text." I explained I'd seen real emergency custody orders in actual war zones, and this wasn't even close. I folded it and slid it into my pocket. Denise screeched for me to return it, that it was official. I told her, "No, this is evidence." Glenn stepped closer, chin jutted, and said if I didn't cooperate, they could use force. "It says so right there." My head tilted slightly, the way a wolf might tilt its head at something small and breakable. "You're going to use force," I repeated. Troy grabbed for the doorknob. I moved. No theatrics. No dramatic choreography. Just raw efficiency forged over years of training. One moment Troy was chest out and blustering. The next he was face down in the flower bed with his arm pinned behind him, nose inches from Denise's prized lilies. Glenn lunged, but I sidestepped. His attempted tackle became a startled squawk and an ungraceful sprawl across the welcome mat. I didn't punch them, didn't kick them. I simply rearranged them. 10 seconds later, Troy coughed into the grass while Glenn lay prone on the porch, my knee resting lightly between his shoulder blades, vest bunched halfway up his spine. Denise backed up, suddenly realizing the man she'd called unstable could fold her HOA into origami. "Here's what's going to happen," said. "You're going to stay exactly where you are, hands visible, while I call the actual police and tell them you attempted to abduct a child under color of authority." I took out my phone and dialed. "Yes, this is Ryan Calder at 3908. Yes. Cedar Trace. I have 2 individuals impersonating officers attempting to remove my minor daughter from my residence with forged paperwork. They're detained on my lawn. No weapons visible. My kid's safe. I'm calm. Send whoever you need." A pause. "Yes, ma'am. I'm that Ryan Calder." "No, ma'am. I did not break them." I hung up and asked Troy and Glenn if they were comfortable. Troy whimpered about his shoulder. "Good," I said. "If you're thinking of moving, don't. You really don't want to see what I'm like when I actually feel threatened." The squad cars arrived 3 minutes later, lights flickering off the pristine homes of Cypress Hollow like accusation. Neighbors spilled onto their driveways with the enthusiasm of people who definitely weren't missing this. The first officer stepped out, hand near his holster, eyes tracking one calm, ex-Navy SEAL, 2 grown men face down on a lawn. One HOA Karen vibrating at a frequency reserved for malfunctioning appliances. I stepped back, hands visible, and explained, "They tried to take my daughter. The whole thing was on camera. The document was in my pocket. I didn't hit anyone. I did restrain them, and I was unarmed." Another officer gently shooed Maddie away from the window with a wave and thumbs up. She smiled, reassured. Denise launched into performance. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she cried, heels clacking. She claimed they intervened for child safety, that I attacked her officers, that they had an order. I silently handed over the folded document. The officer unfolded it, read, blinked, and tilted it so his partner could witness the Comic Sans heading. His partner snorted. "Ma'am," the officer said carefully, "this isn't an order. This is something you printed on your home computer." Denise protested it was a legal instrument, that they consulted Google and a blog. The officer turned the page over. There's no court stamp, no judge's signature, no agency letterhead. It's literally just your signature under the words Emergency Removal Decree. He held up Troy's badge. "And this is a novelty prop." Denise insisted it represented symbolic authority. The officer repeated symbolic authority in a tone that said he was mentally filing this understories for the precinct Christmas party. A supervisor arrived, surveyed the scene with the weary experience of someone who had seen many catastrophically stupid things. I unlocked my phone, pulled up the footage, and handed it over. The video showed everything: Troy and Glenn approaching, claiming they were basically police, threatening they could take her if they had to. In the brief, pathetic scuffle, the supervisor exhaled. "All right. We've got attempted custodial interference, impersonation, criminal nuisance, maybe conspiracy, depending on how much planning went into this little club." Denise sputtered that they didn't understand that I was a Navy SEAL. Trained to kill, dangerous, unstable, that she was trying to protect the children. The officer cut her off, reminding her she'd filed multiple false CPS reports, that they had the records, that CPS found nothing. He turned to me and asked if anyone gave them authority to remove my child. I gave him the same dry look I'd given insurgents who asked dumb questions. Not unless the state of Virginia decided to outsource child welfare to the HOA. A ripple of laughter spread through the gathered neighbors. The officers ordered Troy and Glenn to stand. They did so miserably. "Turn around," the supervisor instructed. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed like church bells in Cypress Hollow. Troy bleated that they were helping. The officer said taking a child from her home with a fake badge was not helping, it was a crime.